All right. Welcome, everyone. Today's IHN webinar is on gut hormones. My name is Ann Siskos. I work for IHN. I'm a program advisor. I host webinars like this one, and I do admin behind the scenes as well. I have a background in education myself, and I am an IHN graduate. So our webinar topic for today is gut hormones. Your gut instinct is right. It's part of the IHN continuing education course coming up soon called Applied Endocrinology. It will be running for 7 Tuesdays starting on June 4th, 6:30 till 9:30 p.m. EST, which is 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. PST. Linda will talk a little bit more about the content of the course, but if you're interested, go to our website under the Continuing Education tab. You can read all about it, and that's where you register as well. Registration closes on May 28th. So our format for tonight, Linda will speak around an hour or so, and then we'll do a Q&A after that. If you think of something while the lecture is going on, just pop it in the Q&A and I will pick those up at the end. Now, to introduce to you Linda. Linda Bazinet is a long-standing and beloved instructor at IHN. She has extensive backgrounds in both education of herself and teaching others. Linda received her Bachelor of Science from the University of Toronto, then a Master of Science from McMaster University. With over 30 years of teaching experience, Linda's passion as a science educator is both to inform and excite students about the natural world in general and the human body in particular. Linda has taught a wide variety of courses at both Seneca and Sheridan colleges, including biology, general and inorganic chemistry, mathematics, microbiology, histology, laboratory techniques, and environmental science. And currently at IHN, Linda teaches biological chemistry, human anatomy and physiology, body metabolism, and applied endocrinology as a continuing education course. Linda, we're very excited to have you here today and to learn about gut hormones. So everybody, please enjoy. Linda, I pass it over to you.
Okay. Well, as Ann said, this is a bit of a teaser for the upcoming endocrinology course. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about gut hormones, which is some of the little known hormones. There won't be a lot of familiar hormones in this lecture. But if you come and take endocrinology, we will be covering all of the major hormones, starting with growth hormone and talking about thyroid hormone and the adrenals and so on. But as I say, tonight it's gut hormones. And that's not something that people are really that familiar with. So let me get my slideshow up here. And you can see the nice heading that says gut hormones. So the gastrointestinal tract, is where we digest our food. But it does contain many endocrine secreting cells. In this webinar, we're actually going to look a little bit at the anatomy and physiology of the gastrointestinal tract. I know that most of you are familiar with this, but I'm going to show you a lot of pictures and maybe some details that you don't know. We're also going to look at some of the many hormones made here. Hopefully, I'm not going to overwhelm you tonight because there's a surprising number of hormones that are made throughout here. These hormones are involved in controlling digestion, which makes sense, but they're also involved in affecting appetite and energy balance. Hormones produced by cells lining the stomach produce, let me rephrase, go back and start again. Hormones produced, that's better, produced by cells lining the stomach include gastrin and ghrelin. And you might have heard about ghrelin. Ghrelin is known as the hunger hormone. Hormones produced by cells lining the small intestine include a dizzying array. We've got something called intestinal gastrin, which is really just gastrin made by the small intestine. GIP, I'm not going to go through what the abbreviations stand for yet. We'll do that as we go through the lecture. Somatostatin, CCK, secretin, VIP, peptide YY, and GLP-1. I told you a lot of these things are not well known. The one that we're ending with, I think you're going to find interesting. GLP-1 is the molecule on which Ozempic is based. So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the seminar tonight. Just a little bit of a reminder of the gastrointestinal tract. Starting from, up to my annotations, we start in the mouth. And you've got the salivary glands and so on. You go down through the esophagus into the stomach. And then from the stomach into the small intestine. I'm not going to go through all the parts there, and then into the large intestine and so on. We're really going to be most interested in the stomach and the small intestine, because that's where most of the hormones are made. When we look at the wall of the gastrointestinal tract, this is called the alimentary canal. We have 4 layers. Those of you who've taken anatomy and physiology with me might recognize this slide. We have the mucosa, the submucosa, the muscularis as 2 layers of muscle, and then the serosa, which is the peritoneum. I'm most interested tonight in those first 2 layers, the mucosa and the submucosa, because those are where the hormones are going to come from. In the mucosa, we've got epithelium, a little bit of connective tissue, a little thin layer of muscle, but there's some glands in here. Likewise, the submucosa is connective tissue, but you see we've got some glands in there too. And so we'll be showing you later on, when I get into this, talking about the small intestine, some of the details of the structure there. There's some pretty pictures coming up. Here's the stomach. You're probably familiar with the stomach. We've got the fundus, which is the top part of the stomach. We've got the body, that's the main part. And then the pylorus, which is funnel-shaped and goes into the duodenum. This area here is the pyloric antrum, and that actually is the area where the first hormone we're going to talk about is made, and that is gastrin. The fundus, the top part of the stomach, is where ghrelin is made. So hormones made by the stomach, as I say, we've got gastrin and we've got ghrelin. Both G, aren't they? Gastrin made by the G cells. I love that, G cells. They call them enteroendocrine cells. And there's a whole bunch of enteroendocrine cells. But I really like the term G cells because G cells move gastrin. As I say, it's primarily in the pyloric antrum. And one of the main signals for the release of the hormone gastrin is food. Food coming into the stomach causes the release of gastrin. Apparently, particularly meat stimulates gastrin production. The release of gastrin is also triggered by an increase in pH. And actually, when food comes into the stomach, we're going to dilute the hydrochloric acid and pH will rise. Gastrin is a large peptide. This is the stuff I care about that maybe nobody else does. It's a large peptide secreted in 2 forms, G34 and G17. G34 has got 34 amino acids. G17 has 17. Surprisingly, the smaller one, which is the more abundant one, has the full activity. But when we look at the lining of the stomach, we've got these gastric pits. And in the gastric pits, and I always feel like it should be a magic school bus journey where I'm going to take the bus, we're going to drive into the pit and have a look at what's inside. At the top part, we have the mucous neck cells, which make, surprise, mucus. Then we've got parietal cells and chief cells. The parietal cells make hydrochloric acid. The chief cells make pepsin. And actually, they make pepsinogen, which we have to activate. And then the green ones on the bottom are not labeled here, but they're labeled here. These are the enteroendocrine cells. That would be the G cells that make gastrin. There you can see our parietal cells making hydrochloric acid and the chief cells making pepsinogen. And you can see that we need, let's see if I can go back. We need the hydrochloric acid to take pepsinogen and activate it, to take pepsinogen and turn it into the active form of pepsin. So let's look at some of those effects of gastrin. Gastrin has a very strong effect on those parietal cells. It stimulates them quite strongly to secrete hydrochloric acid. So it stimulates it like about up to 8 times more hydrochloric acid in the presence of gastrin than without. Also, it has mild to moderate stimulatory effects on the motor function of the stomach. So encourage the burning of the stomach. It's going to help mix the food for us. It causes the lower esophageal sphincter to contract, and that's going to keep food in the stomach. That's going to prevent gastric reflux. We want that. It's also going to cause the ileocecal sphincter to relax. Now, a sphincter is simply a region of higher muscle tone. The ileocecal sphincter is located between the small and the large intestine. So gastrin is going to encourage things to move along. They always say one train in, one train out. Eating does often stimulate defecation. Gastrin is part of the reason for that. Gastrin also enhances the activity of the pyloric pump, and that's going to enhance the emptying of the stomach. So what you can see here is that gastrin is really stimulating many aspects of digestion in the stomach. Now, gastric secretion is not only affected by gastrin. You can see that the brain has something going on here. The cephalic phase. 20% of gastric secretion is due to this. From the sight, the smell, the thought, the taste of food. The gastric phase, though, is responsible for 70%. There's an enteric reflex, so simply having food in the stomach. There's a nervous system reflex here, but gastrin is responsible for a large proportion of the secretion in the stomach. Intestinal phase, there are 10%. Intestinal gastrin, which, as I say, is really gastrin in the small intestine. There's some other hormones and reflexes. But the point really that I'm making here is that gastrin is responsible for the majority of the secretion in the stomach. Gastric secretion, or I should say regulation of gastric secretion, but gastrin, which is responsible for gastric secretion, gastrin secretion is blocked. The stomach pH is below 3. So when stomach pH is very low, we don't actually make gastrin. Well, we don't need to. If we have lots of hydrochloric acid, we've probably also had some pepsin secretion as well. Histamine, acetylcholine, and gastrin all promote gastric secretion, and they're synergistic. And that means that together, they give you more secretion than if you just take them separately and add them up. Gastric secretion also stimulated to a lesser extent by amino acids, caffeine, and alcohol. Some antihistamines, specifically the H2 blockers, such as cimetidine, ranitidine, and famotidine, interfere with gastric secretion. Now, those antihistamines are medications that are taken by individuals to stop acid secretion in the stomach. Cimetidine goes by the brand name of Tegmet. Ranitidine is Zantac, and famotidine is Pepcid. So that's how those medications work, by blocking the secretion of the acid in the stomach. The emptying of the stomach, we saw already that gastrin does have a role in enhancing the pyloric pump, but there's also a nervous reflex when food enters the duodenum, and hormonal feedback actually slows the emptying. So while there are things that stimulate emptying, there's also things that slow the emptying. Hormones that we're going to see later on actually slow down the emptying of the stomach, and that's CCK, secretin, and GIP. So I thought I'd put them in here because we're talking about the stomach and talking about digestion here. And I just wanted to show that there are other hormones that are involved in regulating the stomach emptying. So that was really digestion in the stomach. Ghrelin, made by the stomach, really isn't about digestion. Ghrelin is known as the hunger hormone. It's a peptide, so 28 amino acids long. It's made mainly by the epithelial cells. They're called P or D1 cells, and they're lining the fundus of the stomach. So the upper region of the stomach is where ghrelin comes from. And it's named not for hunger. It's named for its ability to promote growth hormone secretion. The GHRE refers to growth. So ghrelin not only makes you hungry, it also stimulates the secretion of growth hormone. If we look at physiological effects of ghrelin, it potently stimulates growth hormone secretion. It makes you very, very hungry. And what it does, it acts on feeding centers in the hypothalamus. The appetite center is in the hypothalamus. And that really is part of another lecture. So ghrelin is a hormone I do talk about when I talk about appetite and energy balance. We talk about ghrelin, we talk about leptin and so on. But it is a gut hormone, so I slipped it in here as well. If we inject you with ghrelin, you really don't want me to, because if we inject you with ghrelin, you get intensely hungry. It also seems to affect how we handle fat. It appears to suppress the utilization of fat in adipose tissue. Well, we're not going to need to use the fat because we're going to be eating because we're hungry. Oh, ghrelin also makes high-calorie foods seem very appealing. I always find this really interesting. Ghrelin levels are elevated in stress. And ghrelin actually seems to help us cope with stress. Doesn't stress make you hungry? Ghrelin seems to enhance our ability to cope with stress. It stimulates the HPA axis, that's hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Ghrelin stimulates reward and pleasure centers that would be in the brain. Oh, it amazes me that so many of these hormones do multiple things. Ghrelin is also going to act on the emptying of the stomach. It's going to stimulate gastric emptying. It affects the heart. It has positive effects on cardiovascular function. It increases cardiac output. Now, we're not sure if that's actually ghrelin itself or it's because ghrelin causes growth hormone secretion. It may enhance learning and memory. So again, we're having effects on the brain, affects the hippocampus in the brain. It also seems to affect fertility. Mice whose mothers had low ghrelin levels were less fertile. There's a whole range of activities affected here by ghrelin. And here's another interesting one. Responsible for the direct activation of dopamine secreting cells in the brain. And that's interesting because Parkinson's is caused by degeneration of those dopamine neurons. And it's possible that ghrelin could be used to boost resistance to Parkinson's or actually slow the development of Parkinson's. And that's being researched. The amount of ghrelin that we make changes throughout the day. It's affected by the circadian rhythm. Ghrelin levels actually increase before meals. Well, you do get hungry before you're going to be eating, don't you? Even if you don't actually eat. If it's in your normal mealtime, you'll get hungry before that mealtime because your ghrelin levels will rise. And then it decreases after the meals or even after mealtime, even if you didn't eat. But if you're fasting, overall levels rise. Here you can see the ghrelin increasing. You see the red lines are showing breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you see how ghrelin increases before breakfast and then drops down. Increases before lunch and then drops down. Increases before dinner and then drops down. Although I'm a little bothered by that increase that looks like it's happening in the night because I don't want to get up in the night and eat. And very few of us do. But it is interesting to note that ghrelin stimulates growth hormone production, and we do make a fair bit of growth hormone overnight. We can have abnormal levels of ghrelin. Ghrelin concentrations in blood are reduced in obese humans compared to lean control subjects. Really? Reduced in obese humans. Wait a minute. If they're overweight, aren't they eating too much? Aren't they hungry? But they have less ghrelin. So the body's doing what it's supposed to do. The ghrelin levels have dropped. So it looks like people are not overweight for the most part because they have too much ghrelin. But it looks like they might be more sensitive to that ghrelin. We also see that ghrelin levels rise after dieting. And that might be a factor in the fact that people gain weight after dieting. There's a lot of interesting things with ghrelin, and you can see here, made from the stomach, although they actually have it looks like it's coming from the pylorus of the stomach. It's actually the upper region, it's the fundus of the stomach where we have the ghrelin, but you can see that it's affecting many, many parts of the body. You can see there are some effects in the GI tract, but actually, and I didn't tell you about this, but it moderates insulin secretion in the pancreas. You see the effect on the heart, you see the effect on the pituitary, growth hormone secretion, hypothalamus, appetite, energy, and so on. Other areas, mood, cognitive functions, we said like memory, and then behavior preference. So there's a wide variety of effects of ghrelin. And there's more research to be done on ghrelin. But I can move on because we only have an hour tonight or so. And I want to talk about hormones made by the small intestine. And there's a lot of these. There's intestinal gastrin, which, as I say, is very much like gastrin, just made by the duodenum. GIP, which is gastric inhibitory peptide. Somatostatin. Secretin. Cholecystokinin. You take an anatomy with me, or body metabolism for that matter, you might recognize those hormones. Here's one you might not know. Vasoactive intestinal peptide. And I came across some really interesting information about this one. Peptide YY and GLP-1, which is glucagon-like peptide 1. And again, as I say, some of these, you might not know. But you'll know them after tonight. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a look at the small intestine. Most of you know this. We can see that we've got those nice big circular folds, and then the finger-like structures, those are the villi. And if we look at them in more detail, let me get back up with my pointer here. You can see the villi goes up and down. You can see we have those individual cells. Now, the bluish-looking ones there, those are goblet cells, which make mucus. You can see that we've got a villus. Inside the villus, we have a lacteal. That's the green, is a lymphatic vessel. And there's blood vessels here. Look at this little pocket here is an intestinal crypt known as the Crypts of Lieberkühn. You see those? And then this is the little bit of scanty smooth muscle we have in the mucosa and the submucosa down below that. The villi, you could actually see. They're not big though. I mean, we tend to they look big, but they're each between 0.5 and a millimeter in length. So just a millimeter. It gives you a visual. Individual cells, which would be much smaller than that, have microvilli on the surface. We have a lot of ways to increase surface area because we want to have a lot of surface area for absorption of nutrients. That's a scanning electron micrograph of the villi. That's so cool. This is a light microscope image of the villi. You can see we have multiple villi here, and you can see many, many, many cells up and down. Each one of those dark purple bits is a nucleus. You can't really see the lacteal on the inside, but you know it's there. And then we haven't really preserved the lower portion very well. Better here. Lower magnification, though. Here's the villi, and there's our crypts of Lieberkühn. There's the submucosa, and then the two layers of muscle, and the serosa. Up close, looking at those cells from the villi, nice, big, columnar cells with the microvilli on the surface. There's a goblet cell releasing mucus. There's a cell actually being exfoliated there. And you see capillaries here. You can't pick out the lacteal in this image, though. And there's an up-close look at microvilli. So something that you might not be familiar with that well. We see them called the intestinal crypts. These are known as the crypts of Lieberkühn. And they're similar to the gastric pits in the stomach. The crypts secrete many digestive enzymes. So the small intestine, we always think of the small intestine as a place where the pancreatic enzymes work and where bile works and where everything takes place. But we forget that the small intestine is actually very active, secreting a number of substances. And there's quite a lot of digestive enzymes that are made here. And in the crypts, we've got many types of cells. We've got cells that are called enterocytes, and those are cells that absorb water and electrolytes. We've got goblet cells, and I showed you some of the goblet cells in the diagrams. They make mucus, unicellular gland. The enteroendocrine cells are the cells that make the hormones. And there's a lot of different names for individual hormone-producing cells here. We'll see I cells and J cells and so on. And then a really interesting little cell, Paneth cells. Paneth cells secrete antimicrobial peptides. And so actually involved in some immunity for us. Another structure I wanted to mention are something called Brunner's glands. Now, they're only found in the first few centimeters of the duodenum, but they are important. They're mucus glands. They're in the submucosa, and they make alkaline mucus. Remember that the food leaving from the stomach is very, well, it's not food, there's chyme at this point. It's very acidic. And so we want to neutralize that. The alkaline mucus from Brunner's glands is going to help, and is secreted in response to tactile or irritating stimuli of the overlying mucosa, vagal stimulation, that's from the vagus nerve, and gastrointestinal hormones, particularly secretin, which is coming up soon. Secretion of the Brunner's glands helps protect the duodenal wall from the gastric juice. It's going to help neutralize the chyme. And sympathetic stimulation. And remember, the sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight system. That inhibits the secretion of Brunner's glands. And that means that we'll have less neutralization of the chyme, and that makes people more at risk for duodenal ulcers. I wanted to spend a minute talking about those Paneth cells because they're really cool. They're located at the bottom of the crypts. They're important for our innate mucosal defense. They produce antimicrobial peptides and immunomodulating proteins. They help regulate the composition of the intestinal flora. And we've learned that the intestinal flora is so important for our well-being. When we talk about the normal flora that we have in the gut, we know that it's going to be involved in helping to improve our digestion. But we learn that it does so much more than that. And the normal flora is also going to affect our overall immunity, and it's going to affect even our metabolic rate. There's so many different things that can affect it. It affects the brain in multiple ways as well. So the Paneth cells, through their secretions, actually helps to regulate the composition of the intestinal flora. And one of the interesting things is that these cells become immunocompetent close to term. So close to when a baby is being born. And what it does mean, unfortunately, is that babies that are born early, premature babies, don't have mature Paneth cells. And they can be at serious risk for necrotizing and enterocolitis. And so that can actually be life-threatening for these premature babies because we don't have the Paneth cells. This is a lovely diagram with a picture and a nicely labeled diagram that we can look at together here. You can see that we've got the photograph showing you the small intestine. You see the villi, see the columnar epithelium, lamina propria, that's some connective tissue. These are the intestinal crypts, or what we call the crypts of Lieberkühn. As you see this shown down there. And then there's that little thin layer of muscle, the muscularis mucosa that we have in the mucosa. You can see that we have, these are the enterocytes. So those are the cells that were going to be absorptive cells. Down the bottom, at the very, very bottom of the crypts, that's where you find the Paneth cells. Notice there's some stem cells in here too, which is kind of cool. And actually, if they look a little bit more in the crypts, because we're looking at the crypt of Lieberkühn here, you can see that we have the enterocytes, the goblet cells, enteroendocrine cells. So the cells that are making hormones are in here, and then you have Paneth cells down at the very, very bottom. I just wanted to show you the Brunner's glands so you can see them there. They're in the submucosa. You can see the muscularis down at the bottom. And there's a nice look. See if you can see them here. There. You can see the Brunner's gland. So this diagram's upside down to where the other diagrams were. So where the villi are kind of pointing down at the bottom. And then we've got the crypts. You see it's labeled the crypts of Lieberkühn. And there's the Brunner's glands, which make that alkaline mucus that's going to help protect us from the acid from the stomach. More pictures. I want to show you pictures because these are things that you might not know. You see, this one's actually from all the way down further in the small intestine, in the ileum. But there's the crypts of Lieberkühn, and they're at the base of the crypts, are the Paneth cells. Just more pictures. See the villi, see the crypts, you see the Brunner's glands, and down the muscularis is really not very well preserved down at the bottom. One more picture. I think I'm just about done with the pictures. But I wanted to show them to you because these are things that people don't necessarily know about. So now we're going to talk about various hormones made by the small intestine, and it's quite a list. The first one's easy because, well, it's gastrin, but gastrin made by the duodenum. It's released by the duodenum upon entry of food, especially fats. Fats give you more gastrin than anything else does here. And so just like gastrin, it's going to stimulate the gastric glands. It's going to stimulate gastric motility. But it's not particularly important compared to gastrin made by the stomach. Intestinal gastrin, only responsible for about 5% of stomach secretion. So we're not going to spend a long time talking about it. That was just, isn't it interesting? We make gastrin here too. Okay, turn the page. And so we turn the page. And here we are looking at gastric inhibitory peptide. Did I use the abbreviation there? The abbreviation for gastric inhibitory peptide is GIP. GIP. And it's secreted by the mucosa of the upper small intestine, mainly in response to fatty acids and amino acids, but also to carbs. And so the upper small intestine, so we're looking at duodenum primarily. It does what it says. Gastric inhibitory peptide is going to slow down the stomach. It's going to decrease hydrochloric acid secretion. It's going to slow down the emptying of the stomach. It has a mild effect in decreasing the motility of the stomach. And it stimulates insulin release from the pancreas. Excuse me. This is what I call an anticipatory release. We're anticipating that there's going to be nutrients in the blood. Let's get ready for it with insulin. This is one you might not know. Somatostatin. Somatostatin is actually quite interesting because it's made in multiple places. Here we can see it's made by delta cells in the gastrointestinal tract, actually from the pyloric antrum, but also the duodenum. But somatostatin is also created in the central nervous system. It's made in the hypothalamus. It's made in the pancreas. So it's made in a lot of different places in the body. In the hypothalamus, it actually is going to inhibit, this is an inhibitory hormone. Somatostatin inhibits the release of growth hormone. In the pancreas, somatostatin inhibits the release of insulin and glucagon. In the gastrointestinal tract, somatostatin inhibits or decreases gastric secretion. It decreases gastrointestinal motility. It also limits the release of the gastrointestinal hormones like gastrin and secretin. So somatostatin, no matter where you find it, and we find it all over the body, it slows things down. It decreases things. It's an inhibitory hormone. Well, there might be a benefit to that. Somatostatin slows down digestion. And that extends the period of time over which food is assimilated in the blood. So it makes your food last longer. It's going to be utilized, absorbed over a longer period of time. It also decreases the utilization of the absorbed nutrients. So again, it's going to spread out the time period over which those nutrients are going to be made available to the body. It prevents rapid exhaustion of food, makes it available over a longer period of time. This is one you might know, secretin. And the name tells you that it's going to stimulate secretion. It's secreted by what we call the S cells of the duodenal mucosa. And a major stimulus for the release of secretin is chyme. Acidic chyme entering the duodenum is going to cause the release of secretin. It's a 27 amino acid polypeptide. Again, I care about this stuff, you might not. But actually, secretin has an interesting history. It was discovered back in 1902 by Bayliss and Starling, and it was probably the first peptide hormone discovered. It was the first peptide hormone identified, and Starling actually is the one who came up with the word hormone. So the word hormone had not been used until 1905, and Starling came up with that word and used it, and that was based on his studies with secretin. So secretin kind of has a special place in history when we talk about hormones. What does it do? It is going to cause secretion. It's going to cause release of bicarbonate-rich juice. And I didn't say where from because it acts on multiple places. It acts on the pancreas. It acts on the gallbladder. It acts on the small intestine. It increases bile output by the liver. It increases also not just bicarbonate-rich juice from the small intestine, but secretion of the enzymes. Small intestine makes a lot of enzymes, peptidases, disaccharidases, and intestinal lipase. I know you know about pancreatic lipase. Well, we have intestinal lipase here too. It's going to encourage digestion in the small intestine. It's going to inhibit the stomach. It's going to slow down gastric mobility and slow down gastric gland secretion. CCK, cholecystokinin. That's why we like to call it CCK. Cholecystokinin is a real mouthful. CCK is released by the eye cells in the mucosa of the duodenum. It's still enteroendocrine cells. It is especially stimulated by fatty chyme. Other chyme will stimulate CCK, but fatty chyme gives you more CCK. It stimulates secretion of large quantities of enzymes by the pancreas. So secretin gets the pancreas to secrete bicarbonate-rich juice. CCK gets the pancreas to secrete enzymes. It stimulates the expulsion of stored bile and small intestine secretion. So it's going to be acting on those Crypts of Lieberkühn to get them to secrete the enzymes from the small intestine, as well as some of the other activities that we have here. And it's going to slow down the stomach, decreases gastric acid secretion, decreases gastric motility, including the emptying of the stomach. So it's going to slow down the stomach. Well, you know, CCK is released when we get fat. In particular, fat's hard to digest. We need time to digest fat. So a lot of these small intestine hormones say, okay, stomach, slow down. We're not ready for the food yet. Take your time. We got to deal with this meal. But it's going to encourage the small intestine. It's going to stimulate peristalsis in the small intestine. We're going to get another anticipatory rise in insulin. Triggers satiety or a feeling of fullness in the brain. CCK makes you feel full. It's going to be acting on the hypothalamus in the brain. Well, again, it makes sense, particularly if we get CCK when there's fat. Fat's going to take a while to digest. And you know from experience, the fat makes you feel full. Because when you're eating more food, It's going to take us a while to deal with the last meal you ate. It is, though, a short-term effect. It's not a long-term effect, it's a short-term effect, just to give us time to digest this meal. It might actually work by enhancing the transport of insulin through the blood-brain barrier, because insulin also acts on the hypothalamus. Individuals with severe obesity may be less sensitive to CCK. There are so many possible factors in obesity. CCK in the brain, oh, that's cool. May play a role in anxiety and panic disorders. So elevated levels of CCK in the brain actually increase anxiety. And so CCK agonists are being investigated as a possible treatment for obesity. Remember, we said that CCK tells the brain you're full. An agonist means it's going to act like CCK. So basically, when I say CCK agonist, it means a molecule that mimics CCK. Being investigated as a possible treatment for obesity, because if CCK tells you you're full, if we can augment that, we might slow down the calorie consumption of people who are overweight. Another interesting fact, it's a little fact I thought was cool, that cholesterol also affects CCK. It affects the binding of CCK to its receptor. So cholesterol might get in the way of CCK doing its job. This diagram is illustrating control of secretion in the, you can see in the small intestine, but specifically looking at the pancreas and the gallbladder. If you look on the left-hand side, we start number 1 with chyme entering the duodenum, causes the endocrine cells of the duodenum to release secretin and cholecystokinin. CCK is shown as the red dots. Secretin is shown as the blue dots. These will enter the blood because remember, these are hormones. They go into the blood. Upon reaching the pancreas, CCK induces secretion of enzyme-rich pancreatic juice. Secretin causes secretion of bicarbonate-rich pancreatic juice. Up at the top, secretin causes the liver to secrete more bile. CCK stimulates the gallbladder to release stored bile and the hepatopancreatic sphincter. That's allowing it's going to relax, it's going to allow bile to enter the duodenum. And at the very top, well, it's not just hormones, there's also nervous system involved. And so we have the vagus nerve. Stimulation by vagal nerve fibers causes release of pancreatic juice and weak contractions of the gallbladder. There's a lot of hormones here. Just because we're talking about small intestine, I thought I'd just spend a little bit about small intestine movement because there's a lot of different factors. The nervous signal, so the nervous system is involved, affecting small intestine peristalsis, but a number of hormones, gastrin, CCK, insulin. Oh, okay, I'm not really talking about insulin today, but it kind of slips in here and there. And serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. All stimulate. Actually, serotonin is found in a few different places. Secretin and glucagon inhibit. Now, glucagon, you will remember, is a pancreatic hormone. But here's one you might not know. This is called vasoactive intestinal peptide. And it kind of blurs the line between hormone and neuropeptide. There's kind of a blurry line between those two. And I've seen it referred to as both. Vasoactive intestinal peptide. We abbreviate it as VIP. It's one of multiple vasodilator substances released from the mucosa of the intestinal tract. Others include CCK, gastrin, and secretin. VIP is a widely distributed neuropeptide. It's produced by neurons. So as I say, it kind of blurs the line between a neuropeptide and hormone. So in the small intestine, we have the myenteric and submucosal nerve plexus. It's released there. It's also expressed by immune cells, and we find it in Peyer's patches. I don't know if you remember Peyer's patches, but they're kind of like tonsils, and they're found as part of MALT, or mucosal-associated lymphatic tissue, and found in the small intestine. And VIP is expressed by those cells. What does it do? Well, we said it was a vasodilator. It definitely is. It's a potent vasodilator. It affects smooth muscle, but how it affects it depends on which smooth muscle we're talking about. So it relaxes the gastric smooth muscle. So that's going to decrease the motility of the stomach, but it stimulates the small intestine smooth muscle. It inhibits gastric acid secretion. Another really interesting thing about VIP is that it is immunomodulating. It's anti-inflammatory, and it maintains the immunological tolerance in the gut. So when we talk about immunological tolerance, we're talking about not just preventing autoimmunity, although that's part of it. We don't want the immune system to go after and attack your proteins in your body. But we also want to maintain tolerance for foods that we eat, so proteins. We also want to maintain tolerance for the good bacteria that are in the gut. VIP helps us to do that. And there are studies looking at VIP and suggest that it might actually be helpful to treat multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, and type 1 diabetes. Now, I don't know that we know the how yet, but all of those do have some immunity involvement, and that might be why VIP might be helpful in those cases. But there's something else really interesting here. VIP stimulates bicarbonate ion secretion. And if there's too much, we can end up with watery diarrhea. Too much bicarbonate ion is going to make us have extra water in the gut, and we can have severe diarrhea. Well, why would you have too much? Well, sometimes it can be due to endocrine tumors. There are some endocrine tumors that actually secrete VIP, and that would cause it. But it seems to be associated with IBS. If we have people with diarrhea, IBS with diarrhea, it is associated with increased VIP release. And in fact, if we look at stress-induced IBS diarrhea, so some people with IBS will particularly have diarrhea when there's stress, and we find that increased CRF. Now, CRF is corticotropin releasing factor. CRF is a factor from the hypothalamus that is going to stimulate ACTH, which is from the pituitary. That's going to stimulate the adrenals to release cortisol. So, long story short, it's related with stress and cortisol. But that gives us VIP release. And so VIP might be part of what's going on in IBS. And there are treatments, they're looking at possible treatments for IBS involving VIP antagonists, so molecules that will interfere with the action of vasoactive intestinal peptide. Two more hormones to talk about. I told you there were a lot of hormones here. And again, peptide YY kind of blurs the line between neuropeptide and hormone. This peptide is released by cells in the ileum and actually the colon. We haven't talked about the colon much, the large intestine, but we get peptide YY from both places here in response to feeding. So when we eat, we get peptide YY. It acts on, they're called MPY receptors in the hypothalamus. This is the appetite center, and it decreases appetite. It slows down the stomach, inhibits gastric mobility, as well as gastric emptying. And we find that obese people make less PYY, less peptide YY. Therefore, it's being investigated as a potential weight loss drug. There's so many different avenues that are being looked at to help people lose weight. This is one of them. But the one that's popular is related to this molecule. So this is called glucagon-like peptide 1. Glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1. It's produced by cells that are called L cells in the small intestine. It actually looks like it's being made in the pancreas and central nervous system as well. It encourages insulin release. So GLP-1 acts on the pancreas. So it's made by the small intestine, but it acts on the pancreas to encourage the release of insulin. and actually increases the volume of beta cells. The beta cells in the pancreas are the ones that make insulin. So we're going to get more insulin under the influence of GLP-1. It decreases the release of glucagon. Now, I always say that insulin and glucagon are evil twins. I mean, not really, but very much opposite. You know that insulin lowers blood glucose. Glucagon raises blood glucose. So GLP-1 is going to decrease glucagon release. It also acts on the stomach to slow the emptying. And acts on the hypothalamus to increase feelings of fullness. There's a lot here that seems desirable, particularly for people who are overweight. Look at that. If you're overweight, slowing the emptying of the stomach, that's going to slow down your digestion. It's going to make you feel full longer. Acting on the hypothalamus, again, that's going to make you full longer. So having more of this might help you be less hungry and eat less and maybe lose weight. But look at the insulin. Increases the ability of the pancreas to make more insulin. That might be helpful for somebody with diabetes. So we're going to see coming up that Ozempic is based on this. The main stimulus for secretion of GLP-1 is food. And when we eat, we get increased GLP-1 detectable within 10 to 15 minutes. And the levels actually stay elevated for several hours. And it is possible that too little GLP-1 might increase the likelihood or, there's an extra word there, or worsen obesity. So likelihood of or worsen obesity. I just switched the order of those two words there. Less GLP-1 may result in increased appetite. So it is a very interesting target for intervention. There are a whole lot on the market right now of GLP-1 agonists. Again, an agonist is going to mimic the molecule, so it acts like it. And so GLP-1 agonists, so basically molecules that mimic the action of GLP-1. These are medications that are used in the treatment of type 2 diabetes, not type 1, but type 2 diabetes and obesity. Ozempic is the best known one. You might have heard another one. I keep hearing ads for it on I hate these ads on TV because they say, oh, Rybelsus, and they don't ever tell you what it does because they can't. But Rybelsus is another. Both of them contain a molecule called semaglutide, which is going to mimic the GLP-1. There are many other GLP-1 agonists on the market with related molecules. I'm just going to deal with the semaglutide today. Ozempic is a medication that is injected once a week. Rybelsus is actually an oral pill that's taken daily. I think Ozempic is better known, but Rybelsus for many people might be more convenient. And they've been studied and approved slightly differently. So Ozempic is prescribed to adults with type 2 diabetes. That's what it's meant is approved for adults with type 2 diabetes. And actually, one of the things that it seems to do, and it does seem to work, is to lower the risk of heart attack and stroke. Because people with type 2 diabetes have a significantly increased risk of heart attack and stroke. Ozempic does seem to lower that risk. And it also does seem to help manage blood sugar levels. It is prescribed off-label for weight loss. Off-label means it's not approved for that purpose. It's approved to help manage blood sugar. It's approved for cardiovascular disease risk prevention, but it's prescribed off-label for weight loss. Interesting, the Wegovy, which is another semaglutide, is approved for weight loss use. So there's a good chance that if it's researched enough and they go through the right regulatory steps, so Ozempic will eventually be approved for weight loss as well. But it makes me nervous. I know people who've used Ozempic, and I knew one lady who used it and she couldn't stay on it because the side effects were just too much for her. She could not deal with them. So the side effects of Ozempic range from mild to quite serious. Mild side effects include constipation, diarrhea, nausea, abdominal pain, and vomiting. And the nausea sometimes gets moved into the more serious side effect because the severe nausea and vomiting can be debilitating. And the lady that I'm thinking of, she has such severe nausea that she couldn't eat, and she could not stay on the Ozempic. It didn't work for her at all. But the serious side effects are worrisome. Pancreatitis. Now, I had pancreatitis a few years ago, and trust me, that's a serious effect. You really don't want to increase your risk of pancreatitis. The other one is risk of thyroid tumors and cancer. Now, they haven't got the data in humans for that one. The research was done in rats, but still, this is actually, it's called a boxed warning. It's actually right on the packaging that it can increase the risk of thyroid cancer. And for that reason, this would never be given to somebody who has a history of thyroid cancer or a family history of thyroid cancer. It also can worsen or increase the risk of diabetic retinopathy. It can cause gallbladder disease, and some people are allergic to Ozempic. So while many people think that Ozempic is a magic pill that's going to make them lose weight and control the diabetes and so on, I think we need to be cautious with it. So that was a lot of hormones. And believe it or not, that's not all of them. This gastrointestinal tract, particularly the small intestine, makes many, many hormones. So you've seen hormones from the stomach, hormones from the small intestine, and that they affect digestion in many, many ways, but also seem to affect our appetite and the energy management in our body as well. Okay, let me just close this down. That's pretty much the end of what I had here for you.
Okay, I'm here.
You're there. Okay, I can't see.
My video just stopped working for some reason. It says it's on. Oh, okay, very interesting. Okay.
There you are.
That's not
that's better
before.
Okay, I just completely put you in the dark.
Yeah. So, Linda, like so much information there. It's fascinating, especially knowing exactly what Ozempic is.
Well, I figured I'd end with that because that one you can remember better.
Right.
Because there's so much stuff along the way. The thing is, I wanted to include all these hormones because it's amazing just how much is done by the gut.
For sure. And we're hearing about it every day. And I know people who are taking that now too.
Oh, yeah.
So listen, everyone, if you've got any questions, would you please put them in the Q&A? We've got a few minutes left. Linda, you are right, like close to 8 o'clock. I think you're
close, yeah.
7:58. So just under an hour there.
Yeah.
So that's great. And
I may have overwhelmed everybody with information here.
Yeah, that's a lot too. Yeah. And
it is. Well, and but I thought I didn't want to leave these out because I wanted people to have an idea of just what you should walk away from this realizing is your gut's not just where you digest. It's busy doing so many other things.
Yeah, for sure. And that really speaks to me as a holistic nutritionist as well. As you know, if you tinker with one tiny thing, you're pulling the whole web of interconnection. So understanding how everything is connected is so important.
I found the immunomodulating effects to be really interesting. That's what I found personally the most fascinating part of that.
For sure. So we have a question here.
Okay.
Do certain foods increase GLP-1 more than others?
And that's a good question. And I'm not sure is the short answer. Increased by specific foods. And what I do with this is I write down the questions because if I haven't come across that, I mean, yes, we say the main trigger is food release, is food entering into the gut. Do certain foods increase it more than? And that's a good question, and I don't actually know the answer, but I'll see if we know. And I'll see if I can find out, because what I'll do, Anne, I've done this in the past, is when I get questions like this, I will look up answers. I will send them to you and you can send them out. Can you send them out to the panelists?
Yes, we can. So just everybody out there, anybody who registered for this webinar, whether you're here or not today, you get the recording sent to you. So I'll keep an eye on that. And I think we can see the answer for that as we go as well.
I just saw the next question pop up, which is, are the side effects caused by of Ozempic? Is it caused by the GLP-1? And it's not actually GLP-1, it's semaglutide or other things they put in it. I think it's a semaglutide. I think it's actually semaglutide itself that's causing those side effects.
Well, as we know too, most things that we put in our body will have multiple mechanisms of action, right? There's never, if you think about the herbs as well, if we want a herb for calming, it will also do multiple other things.
And is there such a thing as a GLP-1 deficiency? And I think there might be. I think that having decreased levels would, we think, possibly cause increased obesity. And that's why we're looking at increasing the levels. So I think, yes, there is a possibility of decreased levels of GLP-1. Now, how do you naturally increase them? That's a more challenging question. Because this is still all relatively young in terms of our understanding. I mean, 10 years ago, I'd never heard of GLP-1.
Okay, here is a little bit of a longer question, or maybe it's a comment. A comment, I think, and a question.
Okay.
From Brooke. I know someone that was told by their doctor to maybe try Ozempic because they were close to having diabetes, but did not have type 2 yet.
Right.
The doctor did not suggest anything about their lifestyle or food habits. I'm a fan of Ozempic because I like more natural ways of helping the body, but I'm very curious on your true thoughts about Ozempic. I know you talked about it, but would there be something else you suggest?
Oh, lifestyle first, for sure. I don't, Ozempic makes me nervous. I look at those side effects and I get very nervous with Ozempic. And particularly with type 2 diabetes, there's a lot that we can do with lifestyle to prevent and to control it. I don't want to say cure it, because you're always going to be, if you have type 2 diabetes, you're always going to be at risk for it, but you can keep it under control and perhaps in remission through lifestyle. And so I think lifestyle, and I think you guys know a lot of what to do with that in terms of the diet and exercise and so on with that. I mean, that's something that's been talked about in many, many, many different places. And I would far rather do that than to have a medication. Yeah. Having said that, there are so many people out there with type 2 diabetes, and so many people who will not do the lifestyle things. And so for those people, what do you do?
For sure. And we learn about all those lifestyle things in
that's why I'm not going to go through this. Yeah. There's a long list. There's so many things that you can do with lifestyle to improve diabetes. I know people with type 1 diabetes. Actually, I know a lady who's got type 1 diabetes who is under such good, and she has to take insulin because it's type 1, but she's in such good control because she is watching her diet. She is extremely strict, and she's exercising a lot as well. And she's got such excellent control. And yet so many people don't have good control. The vast majority of people with diabetes do not have good control of their blood glucose, because most of them don't do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Marcy would like to know, is there any way to mitigate symptoms of potential pancreatitis for people who choose to try semaglutide for weight loss?
I don't know how frequent the pancreatitis is. I don't think it's common. Pancreatitis is fairly rare. It's very serious. I mitigate symptoms of it. I don't know that you can. I think that if you start to get, if you have pancreatitis, obviously you need to come off the semaglutide, is what it comes down to. Pancreatitis, the symptoms of pancreatitis are vague initially. It's nausea, is upper pain in the upper abdomen. But like I had pancreatitis, I didn't know I had it until I went in, and I got really, really sick. Like it is extremely unpleasant and painful.
Yeah, it's an acute situation.
Oh, it is. And so it's not something, I don't think you mitigate it. Kind of, it happens. Chronic pancreatitis is less common, and I don't think that it is going to be, the symptoms are vague, so it's hard to know for sure that you have that. But if it's acute, Oh, the other thing I didn't say, it wasn't in the slideshow, but I've also seen that Ozempic can increase risk of kidney disease. And so, yeah, so people who've got kidney disease need to be a little bit careful with Ozempic and may not be prescribed it for that reason.
Sure, good to know. And to make an informed decision, to learn all of this and discuss it with your medical practitioner.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody's different for sure.
Oh, yeah. And there are some people for which Ozempic's the right choice. And that's a personal decision that they have to make. My husband, who has diabetes, has been told by the doctor that he won't qualify for Ozempic because it won't be covered because he's doing too well.
Oh, goodness,
Which is what you want.
Story, right?
That's what you want to hear, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't see any more questions
Okay.
here. Linda, do you want to say anything about your upcoming course starting on June 4th?
I'm not sure what else to say about it. It is a comprehensive course. And so we're going to start with, we start with just some general information, but we spend a lot of time talking about growth hormone, and we'll talk about, so we talk about each one of those major hormones, melatonin, I guess a nice lecture, the adrenals, everyone's interested in the adrenals. And we'll talk about how these hormones are made, what they do. We'll talk about things that go wrong. So we will look at disorders. So we'll talk about when you take to the thyroid, there's so much to talk about because we'll talk about hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism and look at where we can. We'll look at what vitamins and other natural treatments are going to be beneficial for each one of these glands. And it's interesting. It's fun to do because there's so much interesting information about these hormones. And so, as I said, we're going to look at all the major ones and some of the minor ones.
Okay, great. We have a few thank you comments to Linda.
Oh.
And I agree. Thank you so much for sharing all the information that you have. If you want to learn anything more about the course, like the course layout, it is on the website under the Continuing Education tab. Oh, another thank you has come in as well. So thank you all for attending tonight. Again, the webinar will be sent out to you as a recording. And I think we'll conclude here then.
Okay, good.
Have a great evening, everyone. Great day wherever you're joining us from. We'll see you next time.